Talking to Tory MPs this morning, one of the questions that kept coming from just about all of them was, how long do you think Suella Braverman's got this time round as Home Secretary? And Suella Braverman seemed to come to the House of Commons rather determined to suggest that was a lot longer than she had last time. As you said, she doubled down on the rhetoric, and that appealed to some hardline MPs behind her who really lapped it up. And she used language which doesn't get used that often in the House of Commons, talking about an invasion of the southern coast. The Joint Council for the Welfare of Immigrants already saying that they think that is dehumanising. She said that it was inaccurate to say she had blocked the use of hotels for migrants who've finished at the processing centre in Manston and need to move out of there because it's not meant to be a place where they stay for more than 24 hours. She denied that allegation, but then she piled in with rhetoric to suggest that's exactly where she comes from in the argument on all of this, saying it's costing the country £6.8 million a day to look after 35,000 migrants who are currently in hotels. Some of those hotels, she said, 4-star. She was very specific about what she was denying in the House of Commons, but you're very struck by the amount of information that is coming out from Whitehall. Some of it you suspect from officials, some you suspect from ministers maybe who've served alongside Suella Braverman, and they seem to be using very pinpoint dates which suggests that they have more information they want to bring out, which they think would undermine what she's been saying. As I said, there was some support in the House of Commons for her, but when she came in behind Rishi Sunak, which most people think is why she's back in government, because she did support him just over a week ago, she alienated some people in the party who were supporters of Boris Johnson, whose campaign collapsed pretty soon after she came in behind Rishi Sunak. Rishi Sunak himself doesn't seem to be joining the witch hunt, which Suella Braverman said was on against her at the moment, and people who are close to him say he would feel it would reflect badly on his own judgment if she were to go sometime very soon. As for how he'd feel about Suella Braverman going sometime a little bit further into the distance, but not that far, well, some of them think that's rather a moot point. Coaches leave the migrant processing centre at Manston in Kent. Thought to be an emergency measure to relieve overcrowding here, which inspectors say is a cause of huge concern. The overcrowding is being blamed on the Home Secretary, Suella Braverman, refusing to sign off hotel rooms for people to move on to. Some officials say Suella Braverman rejected advice that said it was illegal to keep people at the centre beyond their processing.
The Home Secretary.
In the Commons, the Home Secretary insisted she had moved some migrants to hotels and had kept within the law.
To be clear, like the majority of the British people, I am very concerned about hotels, but I have never blocked their usage. Indeed, since I took over, 12,000 people have arrived, 9,500 people have been transferred out of Manston or Western Jetfoil, many of them into hotels. And I've never ignored legal advice.
But government sources insist Suella Braverman did stop new hotel contracts, which people at Manston could move on to, and most of those who moved out on her watch were moving to hotels her predecessor, Priti Patel, had signed off on. Labour claims Suella Braverman pushed back against civil service advice on the very day she lost her job over email leaks.
Can she tell us whether, in fact, she breached the ministerial code which provides for ministers abiding by the law? Did she breach the ministerial code 3 times in a single day?
Let's be clear about what's really going on here, Madam Deputy Speaker. The British people deserve to know which party is serious about stopping the invasion on our southern coast. So let's stop pretending that they are all refugees in distress. The whole country knows that that is not true, and it's only the honourable members opposite who pretend otherwise. Madam Deputy Speaker, we need to be straight with the public. The system is broken. Illegal migration is out of control.
Labour said that was acknowledging years of Tory government failure. They also attacked the Home Secretary on a second front, the circumstances of her forced resignation 12 days ago, when she used a private email account to send government policy papers to a backbench ally. In her original resignation letter, Suella Braverman wrote, "As soon as I realised my mistake, I rapidly reported this." But a chronology she published today shows that as soon as she realised she'd emailed the wrong person, Suella Braverman sent them a message saying, "Please can you delete the message and ignore? Thanks." Nearly 2 hours later, Suella Braverman still hadn't reported anything when she bumped into the Chief Whip and discovered that she knew all about the email, informed by the MP Andrew Percy, whose office received it in error. But it wasn't until some time after midday that Suella Braverman told her private secretary of the personal email, but the Prime Minister already knew all about it via the Chief Whip.
There are some people who would prefer to be rid of me. Well,
Labour's shadow cabinet pointed at the Tory MPs sitting behind her.
Madam Deputy Speaker, let them try.
Some of her own colleagues will do just that. But right now, Suella Braverman has the protection of the new Prime Minister, who brought her back to the Home Office to shut down Boris Johnson's comeback attempt just over a week ago.
Well, we did ask the Home Office for an interview, but they declined. However, I am joined from Westminster by the Shadow Home Secretary, Yvette Cooper. Yvette Cooper, the Home Secretary says that, good evening, the system is broken and only the Conservatives have the guts to deal with what she called an invasion on the South Coast. Do you think that kind of language might resonate with voters?
Well, I think firstly the Conservatives have been in power for 12 years and the huge long delays in the asylum system are a result of their failed decision making, their problems with the complete collapse in decision making. They're only taking half as many decisions as they were 6 years ago, and also their failure to deal with the criminal gangs, the big proliferation of criminal gangs that's taken place in the Channel. But you're certainly right that there is also responsibility on the Home Secretary to think carefully about the language that she uses, particularly the day after there has been a petrol bomb attack on a centre in Dover. And I don't think previous Home Secretaries would have used that language and would have taken a more responsible approach.
OK, but there might be some people listening who are quite receptive to her anger, and in particular the exorbitant, as she put it, cost of hotels for asylum seekers. If there was a Labour government in power, presumably you'd book the hotels, would you, and let the costs soar?
Let's be clear what the government has done and what they've failed to do and why we're in this situation. We've got a big explosion of criminal gang operations that has increased very substantially, and the French and British authorities have failed to prevent that. And we've called many times for an increase in the National Crime Agency, a new unit as part of the National Crime Agency, in order to tackle those gangs. They are profiting from putting lives at risk. These boats are dangerous. They're travelling across the sea, putting people's lives at risk, and the criminal gangs are making profit out of them. So everybody should be trying to prevent those dangerous boat crossings, and that should be about protecting lives as well. The government is currently failing to do that, and in fact it's making things worse.
But if you were in power, people would still be coming across the Channel. That wouldn't stop in the event of a Labour government. So would it make it easier, for example, to deal with this problem if you were part of the EU? Would that be easier?
Well, I think that it's possible to have a better agreement with France, and that should be being done. I think that a lot of that has broken down. But I also wanted to deal with the issues that you raised around the overcrowding, because there's a reason that we've also got the issues of overcrowding as well, because the government's only taking half as number of decisions as they were. 96% of the asylum claims for people who arrived last year by boat have still not been decided. So that means you've got big increases in the number of people waiting in asylum accommodation in limbo. So refugees are not getting the support that they need, and also those who are not refugees are not returning. And that's why you're also getting these huge problems with diphtheria outbreaks, with other things as well. Now, the question is, how is the Home Secretary responding to this? At the moment, she's got no plan to address the backlog, to take fair decisions in the asylum system. system. She's got no plan to tackle the criminal gangs who are making profits out of putting lives at risk. And she's also not, it would appear, the report saying she's not following the legal advice she's been given.
But my
so she
question
may
to
well
you
have
is,
broken the ministerial code again for a third time, even on the same day. And that also raises the wider security questions that I think your report covered, where we still haven't had answers from the government and from the Home Secretary about these repeated security breaches, including some while she was Attorney General, not just while she was Home Secretary. And frankly, her responsibility as Home Secretary is to take national security seriously.
so should she resign as a result?
We've already said, Keir Starmer has already said that not only should Rishi Sunak not have reappointed her just 6 days after she had breached the ministerial code and been forced to resign, he should not have reappointed her and he should replace her. We have to have someone in this post who is credible on security issues, who's got a serious plan to deal with some of the issues around the dangerous channel crossings, but also to make sure that our country can continue to support those who have fled persecution, as we have done in the past, and can deal with some of the crime and policing issues that they're also failing to deal with. And at the moment, there's no sign of this particular Home Secretary being able to do any of those things, and that is damaging for all of us.
Well, apologies, the lights seem to have gone out in the Commons there and on our camera, so apologies for that. Was the Home Secretary, however, despite your reservations about her conduct, was she justified in ordering a review of the use of hotels?
Well, we've called for the government to have a proper plan so that they don't need to use the hotel accommodation on the scale that they're doing, because that is causing, as a result, that is a consequence of the backlog and is also pushing up the costs to the taxpayer as well. It is as a result of the backlog having gone from about 5,000 people to over 90,000 people in the space of 5 years, and that's because they're not taking decisions. They're only taking 14,000 initial asylum decisions in the past 12 months. It was twice that if you go back 5 or 6 years ago.
Right.
And that's the fundamental cause of it. So if they dealt with that, if they cleared the backlog, then they wouldn't need to use hotels in the first place. And that, I think, it is a sign of failure that they're not able to speed people through the system so that those who are refugees can get on with their lives, can get jobs, can work, and those who are not obviously will be returned.
OK, so you know from your experience in Labour government that a Labour government previously has dealt with an even bigger asylum backlog. So I ask again, would it be easier to deal with all of this if the UK was in the EU still?
Well, I think we can still have strong cooperation with Europol and with other police forces and so on, and with the other authorities. You do have to have a good relationship in place. Sorry, the lights just come back on again.
Apologies.
You do have to have the proper relationships in place. That's certainly the case. The thing that we used to have was obviously the Dublin Agreement, which included both safe returns and also safe family reunion as well. The government promised that they would try and negotiate a replacement for the Dublin Agreement and then totally failed to do so. But it ought to be possible to have that kind of agreement with other European countries or directly with France whilst still being outside the EU. We have many other agreements with France whilst outside the EU. So that ought to be possible. I think, however, there's been a failure of will and there's been all sorts of rows with France rather than actually figuring. Frankly, both the British and French authorities need to do more if we're to prevent lives being put at risk.
Yvette Cooper, thank you very much, and apologies again for the vagaries of the lighting there. Jackie.
Well, let's get more detail on the situation at the Manston Immigration Centre from our political reporter Serena Barker-Singh, who sent this report from the site in Kent.
Checks at the gates as more people arrive today to a migrant facility already holding double the amount of people it was designed to. Conditions there so deteriorating it left the Chief Inspector speechless. All could have been avoided, says one Tory MP.
The Home Secretary decided as a matter of policy not to commission more hotel or alternative accommodation. What's now happened is there's a logjam because there's nowhere to put them, and the reason there's nowhere to put them is because the Home Secretary didn't commission the other places.
In this otherwise sleepy part of Kent, this facility is meant to be for people who cross the Channel for only 24 hours before they move on to hotels. One family told the inspector they'd been here a month.
Freedom!
Charities visiting the site yesterday said they saw young children in a dangerous situation, left inside a facility with outbreaks of diseases, reports of diphtheria.
We were able to speak to some people that we saw in the courtyard of a building inside the camp, which we were kind of shouting to over the fence. Lots of families and lots of young children. And when we asked them where they were from, they said, Syria, Iran, Iraq, Afghanistan. These are countries where there is war, there is persecution. And I think that, you would hope that people fleeing those circumstances would be treated with some care and empathy.
Compounding the situation, a petrol bomb attack last night at a separate border facility just 30 minutes away, forcing hundreds of people to move from there to an already crowded Manston. Residents in the surrounding areas are concerned by the rising numbers. Yesterday, 468 people crossed the English Channel in small boats, taking the total number of people making that journey this year to almost 40,000. Compare that with last year, the number was lower, 28,461 people. And 2 years before, around 8,000 people arrived in small boats.
Tell me what you're doing.
Putting spikes up here, we have one over there. I'll put the same over the back, I will. They won't come near.
Stunned by the events of last night in Dover, a local resident, Barry, is taking matters into his own hands.
We have these things on the beaches that are coming over in droves, and no one's doing anything. They're wasting so much, so much bloody cash on what?
But what can they do?
Turn them round.
What's wrong with economic migrants coming here to seek a better life?
Economic migrants, all they are, economic, not fleeing, say, war-torn countries.
Some of them are.
How many?
Are you the right person to get this crisis under control, Home Secretary?
The figurehead for this deepening political crisis, Suella Braverman, finally faced questions publicly today, saying there are currently 35,000 migrants housed in hotels. She didn't disclose how many more spaces will be available for people at Manston or how long those waiting will have before they can leave.
Now, Manston isn't like other permanent facilities. It's a temporary one. People are meant to be here for a short-term stay. That's about 24 hours. So they're only really meant to be processed here. It also means other things. There are light NGO presence, fewer charities, fewer lawyers for legal representation, just because of the short nature of how many people are meant to stay. Now, obviously, we know now that Manston is overcrowded. And what's compounded the problem is an attack on another migrant centre in Dover last night. Now, we've seen arrivals from that facility being transferred here. I was also speaking to an eyewitness who said that they saw 13 coaches yesterday bring people from the facility. So that influx of people is compounding the problem of an already overcrowded Manston. Now, it's clear the numbers of people arriving in small boats is concerning to the Home Office, but it's also concerning residents here. People I've spoke to who live just a stone's throw away say that living next to Manston, which is only a year-old facility, they say that's become intolerable. But what's worse, they don't see a solution really on the horizon.
Well, joining me now, thank you, Serena. Joining me now is the Tory MP, Jonathan Gullis. Jonathan Gullis, when you think about the fact that there were 4,000 people in the Manston Centre, designed to accommodate 1,600 people, this is a blatant failure of government policy, isn't it?
No, what's happening right now is that we've got too many illegal economic migrants crossing the English Channel from safe mainland Europe, coming to the UK for no reason whatsoever when they are already in a safe European country. Many of those people as well being Albanians, not forgetting that Albania is a member of NATO, is looking to join the European Union. It's simply not acceptable that criminal gangs are exploiting vulnerable people, but also people are trying to game our immigration system. And
Well, I'll come back to the numbers crossing in a second and the impact that, we were supposed to take back control of our borders after Brexit. But I want to talk about the reason for the numbers in Manston now, because it was simply because of the Home Secretary's refusal or delay in booking hotel rooms, wasn't it, that the numbers, the overcrowding is so substantial.
The Home Secretary's made it clear that she has sought to seek hotel accommodation, but let's be quite frank, the British people aren't happy with this. This is a totally unacceptable situation to people, particularly in places like Stoke-on-Trent, which is the 5th largest contributor to the asylum dispersal scheme in this country, where we already have over 800 people in our city, and we're due to have another 82 arrive at the North Stafford Hotel, which is not something that the local police, the local council or the local MPs are desiring at all. So, you know, at the end of the day, what we have is a situation that is untenable. We need to make sure that the French are stepping up to prevent those boats from launching. We need people to be doing the correct and responsible thing in claiming asylum in the first safe country they arrive in. Those are in mainland Europe. And we need to make sure that we have a system that is fair, that we have a points-based system that people can apply to if they wish to come to this country, and that they should go through those normal procedures.
OK, but the Home Secretary says the system is broken. The Conservatives have now been in power for 12 years. So either your party broke the system or failed to fix it.
No, don't forget, we were members of the European Union for around 9 of those 12 years to date so far, and a Labour Party in government before us who love open borders, who love free movement, who still to this day want to still see people coming over in their droves, when actually it's this government has introduced the fantastic Rwanda policy that the Home Secretary is trying to enact and the Prime Minister is fully supportive of, because we need to make sure that we have a deterrent to people illegally entering our country, which is totally unacceptable, puts the security of our country in harm's way. And
but what happened to taking back control? Because the number of asylum applications is the highest in 19 years. So things have got worse since Brexit, not better.
Well, let's not forget that you've got criminal gangs who are exploiting the system as it currently is, and we've currently got the Rwanda policy held up in the court system because of lefty lawyers who want to try and prevent this fantastic policy from being enacted, where we saw it work in countries like Australia. So actually what we're trying to do is make sure we deliver on those manifesto commitments. We're going through the court system, as we say, with Rwanda, and what we're trying to do is take on those criminal gangs, and we need the French, the Germans and other Europol to step up and make sure that they are putting handcuffs on those people exploiting people's lives.
Would you talk about an invasion on the South Coast, as the Home Secretary did? Would you use that kind of language?
I would say there's totally unacceptable amount of people coming to this country illegally when they do not need to, because they're already in safe mainland Europe. And it's totally unacceptable for my constituents in Stoke-on-Trent, North Kidsgrove and Talk, having to watch the amount of people that are coming over to game the system, to jump ahead of the queue, when we have a fantastic points-based system that people can apply through.
Jonathan Gullis, thanks very much. Jackie.
Thank you.
Well, earlier I spoke to the Chief Inspector of Prisons, Charlie Taylor. He's been monitoring Manston, visiting twice in the last few months. His report into the detention centre is out tomorrow. I asked him first about the conditions at Manston from his last inspection.
Well, we inspected the site in the summer, and actually we were quite encouraged by some of the stuff we saw there, that actually most migrants were being processed fairly quickly. We had some concerns about the levels of staffing, and we had concerns that some people were staying there for longer. I then returned in September just for a day, and again, we were seeing people being kept there for longer, sometimes up to 4 days or so. But what we're concerned about is the reports that we're getting in now. So what I've said is that we will return in the very near future to go and re-inspect the site.
And on those reports that we're getting now, they're absolutely damning, aren't they? Your counterpart, the Chief Inspector of Borders and Immigration, said he was left speechless by dangerous conditions there. And the MP, Roger Gale, a Conservative, said they're wholly unacceptable. That is a really bad state of affairs, isn't it?
Absolutely right. This is a short-term holding facility. The concern that we're seeing is that large numbers of people are being held in conditions that the centre simply isn't geared up for.
So just give us a practical sense. It's very important, as you say, to know that this is a processing centre. They're only supposed to be there really for 24 hours. We understand there are people being kept much longer than that. What is the problem if people are not moved through?
In effect, what you've got is lots of marquees. The marquees are temporary structures, and then people have got blankets or fairly thin mattresses that they're using on the floor. And that's pretty much it. There was almost no access to fresh air at all. Apparently that has now been rectified, and there is some access to fresh air. But nevertheless, these are not conditions that we would expect any detainee to be held in, whether it was in prison, whether it was in an immigration removal centre.
And as we understand it, Manston is supposed to have 1,000 people every 24 hours. And right now, it is said to be 4,000 people.
That's absolutely right. And the Home Office needs to get a grip. They need to make sure that people are processed quickly as possible, and they're sent to accommodation which is actually appropriate. Manston is not a place for people to sleep in.
People often imagine, and there's a lot of talk at the moment, that it's young, fit, healthy men all the time, but children are being held here at the moment, aren't they? And we're getting reports of children in real distress.
Yes, when I visited, I had a long conversation with a Syrian family who'd made their way over to the country. But there was one tent which was full of various family groups.
If, as is being suggested, I think it's being denied by the Home Office, that it's part of some political strategy to deter people, to deter migrants from coming across it in significant numbers. They're continuing to do that with the good weather at the moment. But if that was a political strategy to deter, how does that fit with legal obligations from your point of view as the Chief Inspector?
Well, we inspect places of detention, and Manston is a short-term holding facility, and therefore people should be moved on as quickly as possible.
So in terms of, as you say, the Home Office needs to get a grip, what do they need to do right now?
Well, the first thing is to make sure there is adequate accommodation elsewhere for people who are at Manston. But the second thing is to speed up the processing arrangements. And I don't know what those are like at the moment, and I don't know where the bottlenecks are currently. But they need to speed up the processing arrangements.
There are many people who are very unhappy about immigration centres in their area. As I say, that there seems to be no slowing down of the number of people who are making the migrant crossings. What for you is the answer?
Well, look, people have got very strong feelings about this. This is and it's a highly politicised matter. But nevertheless, people who are in detention in this country should be kept in decent and humane conditions. And it sounds from what we're hearing at Manston that that's not the case at the moment.